Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to episode 3 of Distant Disney. I'm, as always, Danny Newman.
And I'm Brandon Anderson, or to better theme for this podcast, and the theme of this one, Buenos dias, buenas noches.
Yeah.
Or good
I guess
morning.
I should have looked up how to say hello in all 11 languages that are represented here. Or 11 countries. I guess there's a couple countries that speak the same language here. But yeah, so today's podcast topic, our episode is going to be on World Showcase in Epcot. I'm really glad you suggested this last week, Brandon.
I was going to say, I guess I gave it away there, but World Showcase is one of my favorite areas in all of the Disney parks. In fact, it's the number one reason why I love Epcot so much.
It's also, when I was going through my research on this, there really is so much that happens in World Showcase. I hadn't even considered that not only do you have, as we'll go into in a moment, all 11 pavilions representing all 11 countries, you also have Food and Wine Festival that happens there. You have like 2 restaurants per pavilion in some cases. And then you have illuminations there as well. And all the entertainment. This is a huge machine that's just running and where there's so much going on.
Yeah, and beyond all of that, I mean, so much that went into... as I researched, that went into creating each pavilion, making each one come to life. And then obviously, as we will address later too, there are tons of rumors about what countries could maybe one day come to the area, and what maybe they also had considered at one point and basically had to nix.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to use as a justification when people are, sometimes Disney fans get tossed shade. Like, oh, why are you a grown adult that loves Disney World so much? And you can kind of respond with this. Well, they have this area in the park called World Showcase that actually deals very directly with diplomatic and country relations. And some of these countries didn't get in because they weren't in great relations with the U.S., or they are hoping to in the future. They just didn't have enough money to get in. It's a fascinating subculture within Disney World.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is probably one of the best spots for people who are adults who want to find something enjoyable at Disney, namely, of course, the alcohol, which we will talk about. You hear the entire drinking around the world, which I'm pretty sure everybody who is an adult at Disney has probably at least attempted to do at some point, or has maybe...
Or at least done partially. Yeah, I am not really one for drinking at Disney World. I think beyond just the fact that you're in Disney World, I think that drinking in the middle of a hot Florida day just sounds unpleasant. But I have had a couple of drinks. I think it was Germany, a couple places when we were there last.
Yeah, I would say Germany, Mexico, Canada. I could go into a lot of the drinks, and that's going to make me sound bad, but I could tell you a lot of the good ones through World Showcase.
Yeah. They know what they're doing. Disney knows exactly what they're doing at this point. But yeah, so we've already kind of given it away, but there are 11 pavilions. So the uninitiated, they might not know this. I'd imagine most people know that there are 11 pavilions representing various areas of the world. And ideally, one of the things that Epcot is really big on is that each of the pavilions is staffed by cast members, here meaning, of course, employees, is staffed by cast members actually from that country.
Correct. So... for example, I can go ahead, if you are unfamiliar, I can list off the countries for you. We have Mexico, Norway, China, Germany, Italy, the United States of America, Japan, Morocco, France, the United Kingdom, and Canada. I believe I covered them all.
Yeah, and now I think actually there answered one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, which way do you begin when you enter into World Showcase? Do you begin at the Mexico side or the Canada side?
I used to be so specific on this because everybody will tell you that you are supposed to start on the Mexico side. I always started on the Canada side, and
really?
That was because at the time when I first started going to Disney World, I was really amazed by specifically Canada, the UK, and France. Mm-hmm. Those 3 pavilions were always the one that caught me the most, so I think I always started on that end. But now I'm indifferent to it. It's really dependent on what specifically I am looking to do in World Showcase.
Okay. I think, I am one of those people who's always started on the Mexico side. And I think it might be something just as simple as I think the Mexico pavilion is just a bit closer to that main avenue than the Canada pavilion is. So, Disney was always known for the use of the weenie, which is kind of something that grabs your eye and draws you further down the path. And Mexico really acts as a big weenie when you're coming into World Showcase. You want to go, oh, I see American Adventure way on the other side of the lagoon. I don't know how to get there. Oh, but look, here's Mexico over here. As you kind of go off that, you can't really see Canada from the path.
Right. And I think the idea was, for that originally. So I'm indifferent to either way. I think now, if you were looking to do that drinking around the world, I have always been told you start in Mexico because that is where you'll find the
For the
strongest drinks.
tequila?
And it is
Yeah.
better to get those done first.
I agree with that. I've never actually attempted a whole drinking around the world because I mean, I might do it at night, but I'm not really one for day drinking. But that brings up another interesting aspect of the park. This park, I think, has some of the shortest hours of the parks out there. That's very consistently, especially now the Animal Kingdom is open into the nighttime hours. Epcot is always open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and I've never seen it do anything else but that.
I think there have been a few times that I've seen it stay open until 9:30, but yeah, mostly a 9 p.m. thing.
Yeah. And then also within that, World Showcase usually opens up at 11 a.m. every day. So it's an all day park, but considering how huge this park is, it feels a little smaller than the window time. If you go to Magic Kingdom and they during peak hours, they'll open up at, 8 o'clock and go until 1 a.m. sometimes, especially over between Christmas and New Year's. I mean, you might as well be there for about 20 hours a day if you wanted to. And
Right.
here, you don't have that window of time.
Yeah, and speaking of the size in general of Epcot, for park guests, specifically for guest areas, it is the largest park. It is not the largest entire park by land area. That would be a title owned by Animal Kingdom. But
Yeah.
as far as where guests can go, Epcot is by far the biggest. And just to give you an idea, from the area just around the World Showcase Lagoon, it is over a mile. It's 1.2 miles.
Yeah, it's a big, long walk, and you kind of feel it when you get to the end of it. But it is great because you do have 11 uniquely themed pavilions and countries within that walk. So it does a good job of distracting you. And especially if you stop and do a ride or go to a restaurant or get a drink, you kind of forget that you're walking so far. I do want to mention, because you did just bring up the fact that Animal Kingdom is actually the largest theme park in Disney World, which I think might be surprising because it's certainly not the largest guest area theme park. But thanks to its attraction, Kilimanjaro Safaris out in the back, that attraction alone, which is bigger than Magic Kingdom, that makes it the largest theme park in Disney World.
Right. And I'm not exactly sure what the statistics are, but I have heard, and this probably goes back to what you say, and we're getting a little off topic, but I have heard that you could fit Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and Hollywood Studios fairly comfortably in the entire land space of Animal Kingdom. I don't know if that's for sure true.
I've heard that too. And that, one of the hard things about talking about Disney or doing a Disney podcast is that so much of the company and its statistics have now passed into the realm of legend that it's a lot of work but it's also a little less fun to separate fact from legend.
Sure.
I mean, half the thing I love is all these Disney legends. But yeah, so I want to talk about, each pavilion. This is, I was really excited when you suggested this, but this is also, as I mentioned, a daunting task because there's just so much happening in just this back half of the park. We're not even going to talk about Future World today.
Yeah, there are little hidden gems, very specific things in every single country that make each pavilion unique. And I was reading through something online that was different hidden secrets about World Showcase. And to be honest with you, about half of them I really did not know.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those parks that has a lot of history and backstory because, of course, it started out as such a separate thing. Walt Disney's idea for Epcot was literally what the acronym now stands for: Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. He wanted to build an actual city with a business district and a residential district, and he wanted to see if he could just create a better city than the government could occasionally. Take that as you will, whatever his political leanings were. But then Epcot, as we know it today, Epcot Center originally was kind of the mishmash of three different ideas: that original community idea, kind of a larger Tomorrowland, Future World idea, and then also the international I mean, the international gateway, I know that's a thing that's in Epcot right now, but this international gathering of cultures in these pavilions. And so we kind of ended up getting all three in one, minus the actually being able to live there.
Right. So, and then not to mention, you have the little section in between that represents some African countries that actually falls between China and Germany.
Right. Outpost.
And that one is yeah, the African outpost, and that one is actually almost like an unofficial 12th pavilion.
It is. Well, yeah, I'm jumping ahead, but that was originally kind of the placeholder for another pavilion that was going to represent equatorial Africa. Some of those countries right down the middle of, I think it's the sub-Saharan Africa, but just never got built. One of those things that Disney had fully fleshed out and never constructed. So now we have a little quick service snack food and beverage thing there with, kind of some cartoonishly Africa theming, but it's just a little outpost in this 1.2 mile walk that you're doing all the way around World Showcase Lagoon.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that 1.2 mile walk, shall we go around the world?
Yeah, let's go around the world. Let's start. So which side would you like to start on? You said you normally do Canada, or do you want to start in Mexico?
I think we start with Mexico
I
because
think we
that's
start
what
with
you
Mexico
typically
too.
do, and it's one of my all-time favorite pavilions because I do think it is just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So the Mexico Pavilion, when you're walking up from Future World of Epcot, the Future World, the rest of Epcot, you'll make a left and you'll immediately see this giant Mesoamerican Aztec-inspired temple. Using, of course, Disney's brilliant forced perspective, the scale of things becomes smaller as it gets higher, making you think it's actually taller than it is. And you've got some quick service places on the right. You've got, if I can find the name of them in my notes, the little La Cantina de San Angel. You've got great tacos and nachos and very stereotypical Mexican foods are all delicious, of course. But when you really go inside the Mayan, the Aztec temple, that's where the magic really is in there.
Yeah, so obviously, as you walk inside the temple, you will find a couple of different things. You're going to find these little, they're not even gift shops, they're like little carts. And it's very much like something you would see maybe in a Mexican open air market or something like that, where you have different little carts where people are selling little trinkets or little mementos. You may go up and find some hand painted small little wooden animals or hand carved animals. That's one of the most common things you might find in Mexico. I remember in a Spanish class I had a teacher who was from the city of Oaxaca, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most famous things there is their hand carved, hand painted little animals. And you will find those right there on those carts. You'll also find, of course, the full service restaurant inside Mexico, which I have never eaten at, but it is beautiful. You're going to walk in and it's this very dark, candlelit environment. And of course, along where the tables are, you will see a little river, which leads you to one of the most underrated rides in any theme park in the world, much less in Disney World. That is the Grand Fiesta Boat Tour, starring none other than the Three Caballeros.
Right, and you mentioned that indoor full table service restaurant called the San Angel in Restaurante. Forgive my atrocious accent, but and you did say that it's all lit by candlelight, and that is because now these pavilions, these countries, all represent kind of a classic look at the country, not necessarily a contemporary look at the country. The American Adventure is kind of set, as we get to later, is kind of set in colonial times. And it's the same thing here. And that meaning that this is kind of a pre-electricity look at Mexico, when during the day it's set all at night, because during the day in classic Mexico, according to this pavilion, everyone would it was siesta time. There in the heat of the day, there wouldn't be as much activity in the market from mid-afternoon. But as soon as the sun goes down and night comes out and the candles are lit and it's a little bit cooler, that's when all of this activity explodes to life. And you got the market buzzing, you got the boats going by, you got the restaurant really humming. And so that's why this whole thing is at night.
Yes, and most recently, I will say another little addition to the Mexico Pavilion. It's very small and it's hard to see, but when you walk inside the temple, you will see little, almost like little mementos, little things inside glass cases that are resemblant of the Coco movie, which came out by Disney Pixar,
Right.
I believe about a year ago now. It was last fall when they created Coco, which was one of the coolest Disney stories, I think. And it also had a really good idea of the traditional Mexican family. It had the strong presence and influence from elders and from the grandmother, something that you learn is very important in that type of culture. And just really cool story. And there are little things now inside the pavilion that take you back to that film.
Yeah, Disney's now really getting better about creating movies that fit into these other cultures, which now they can tie into these Epcot World Showcase pavilions. But yeah, so you mentioned the Grand Fiesta Tour, which was originally, and you're going to notice a pattern here. It was originally a boat tour through the history of Mexico and kind of Central America. Wait till you see what the rest of the attractions in World Showcase are. But it was originally just a pretty straightforward boat ride, and there had some screens and look around and see all the beautiful landscapes of Mexico. That version of the attraction closed in 2007. A couple months later, it reopened as the Grand Fiesta Tour boat cruise, starring the three caballeros. Again, sort of stereotypically, comically, quote unquote. I hesitate to call them Mexican, but quote unquote, they're very cartoonish. Birds flying around, still kind of giving you a tour around Mexico, but now with these cartoons just showing you around.
Yeah, cute little boat ride. It lasts only all of maybe 3-4 minutes, but it is something that will take you through one of Disney's original classics, which was The Three Caballeros. It was a movie that wasn't quite as popular. Obviously, it stars Donald Duck, and then it has Panchito and Jose Carioca, which are the other two that you will see with him. And it is just a good little time to go in and rest. I don't think I have ever waited for the Grand Fiesta boat tour for more than 2 minutes at a time. So you can literally, it's almost always a walk on, and it is a great little thing when you are tired, when your feet hurt, when you want a little bit of a break and you want to get in the air conditioning. That would be my number one pick at Epcot.
This is one of those attractions that there's so many things in Epcot that are really hidden in other things. I'm thinking even of the land over in near Soren, where they're living with the land in the land pavilion. There are just a lot of attractions that you really wouldn't know either by looking at the pavilion at face value. I mean, certainly looking at this temple from outside, it's really deceiving in terms of how huge it is inside. It's a really small looking temple, and you walk in, and they've obviously got this giant show building behind it, but it's enormous. And then even the entrance to this attraction is really hidden off to the left. So you might be at the back of the shops or the restaurant, see these boats going by, and still have absolutely no idea where they're coming from. And in fact, they're boarding really close to you. It's very, very hidden.
Right. So, and the last thing that I obviously know is very notable, you mentioned the quick service in Mexico with all of the different foods. You have tequila in Mexico, and everybody
Oh
is going to
yeah.
Mexico looking for the tequila. There are several different kinds of margaritas you're going to find on the rocks. You're going to find frozen. You're going to find flavored margaritas. And yes, they are quite strong. And it really does just kind of bring you back to that full circle of, it kind of gives you that traditional Mexico flair. You go outside, and one of the things you're going to see outside of the temple is a mariachi band, which is very common to see, at least at one point on the streets of Mexico. And it's these a group of men who are playing little guitars, and it's beautiful. And it really makes you feel like I think it brings you into World Showcase and makes you feel like, wow, I have literally stepped out of a theme park, and now I have traveled the world by only taking a few steps.
Right. That mariachi band is actually really nice. It's a big band. It's, what would you say, about 12 people in there, and very talented performers. And they really do. I mean, live performance will always add to anything, no matter where you put them. But those guys in particular are very talented. They are a great addition to the outdoor area of this pavilion.
Exactly. And you will notice a trend as you go through World Showcase. It will not be the only live performance you will see. And I think that's what sets it apart. So as you take a couple steps away from Mexico, you are going to walk over into Norway, which has by far, out of any of the pavilions, seen the most changes in the last several years, and
Oh,
might be
absolutely.
probably the most unique country you might find, Norway or Morocco, at World Showcase, because it's not one you would necessarily have immediately guessed to see.
No, yeah. When you're thinking of some of the top world powers or world cultural influencers, yeah, I think it'd be safe to say that Norway is a phenomenal country. Obviously, they got a great thing going over there, but you don't necessarily think of them as huge world influencers. And so they are actually not one of the original pavilions that opened up when World Showcase opened on October 1st, 1982. It only had 9 pavilions. And it's funny you mentioned that the two kind of outstanding ones were Norway and Morocco. Those both opened at a later date, Morocco in 1984 and Norway in 1988. So it's a bit of a later addition, and I think it shows.
Yeah, definitely. Norway has, like I said, gone through some different changes. So, for those who don't know, hopefully you know some world geography. Norway is a Scandinavian country on the northern half of Europe, and it is a very cold climate. It is known right now across the world as being actually one of the best countries to live in, to raise a
Yeah.
family, to visit. They are known to have one of the best education systems in the entire world. So they have a lot of great things in this country and a very unique culture that is, it really just, there's something amazing about it. When you walk into that pavilion, they have a unique accent. They have a little bit of a different way of life, obviously, just based on how cold their climate is. I think that's a big thing I always notice.
Right. And again, as you said, the unique accent staffed by actual Norwegians participating in the international college program where they bring young people from other countries. They get to come live and work in the United States for about a year. They get to work at Disney World and represent their countries in their own cultural pavilions, which always, I'm trying to imagine, as you and I are both former cast members, I'm trying to imagine one of the things I loved going to work at Disney was getting to work in these wildly different environments. I can't imagine going to Disney World and working in a traditional representation of your own country.
It has to be a bit intimidating when you think about it, because not only are you coming to another country to work and meet people, it was intimidating for me to come to the Disney College program and not know anyone. And I came from, just a couple states away. So imagining people who are traveling the entire world to come and do this program. And, I asked a couple different cast members who were the international CPs, and I said, well, how does the pavilion that you work in stack up to your home country? And a lot of them say, it really is very, very similar. Obviously, like you mentioned earlier, the pavilions are intended to represent the very traditional aspects of each country, like we're going to see when we go to the USA. You're going to see the more traditional things, and it may not be a more accurate representation of what the country is now, but definitely kind of it embodies all of the ideals and all of the history of that country.
Yeah, it takes you back to pre-internet, pre-TV era, I think, when the world was kind of a larger place and each culture was more uniquely defined versus now, I mean, you could watch a YouTube video from someone in Norway and they probably wouldn't seem a lot different. But back when these countries were supposed to represent, before everyone was so interconnected, it was a time when cultures were just very, very different. So yeah, so you go into Norway and you have some really beautiful architecture in here. You have one of them on the right as you come in. You have I'm probably going to butcher this, but you have the Akershus Fortress, which later became home to the Akershus Royal Banquet Hall, which that restaurant later became home to their princess dining. They have a character dining thing in there, which I unfortunately have never done. I mean, I think that's going to be one of the running themes throughout this podcast episode is not having tried all these restaurants throughout this World Showcase because there are just so many of them. I don't know anyone who has actually done everything there is to do in World Showcase.
There are so many, and go stand outside the Akershus dining hall there for the princess dining experience, and you will never find yourself in a situation where there is not a line out the door,
Yeah.
because you will find, I have seen every princess in there: Snow White, Cinderella, Belle, Rapunzel, Tiana, you name it. Who am I forgetting? Ariel. We have Aurora. Everybody is in there at some point, and they do trade out who is in there, but that's any little girl's dream, is to go dine with every Disney princess.
Right. This is not one of those hidden attractions I was just talking about. This is a very well-known restaurant, and if you and your family are thinking about attending and want to go to this particular restaurant, reservations are recommended for this place.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, as you stroll through Norway, beyond the restaurant, one of the most notable things is the attraction at the back of the Norway Pavilion. So, right now, it is currently a boat ride that is all about the movie Frozen, which obviously takes place. I believe it takes place in Norway, or somewhere very similar,
It's
but
the movie has kind of left it open ended. It's and I remember this when the attraction being developed. It is an ambiguous Scandinavian country. They never did specify Norway. Well, because I mean, it's magic, and so it's not necessarily the real world. But Epcot decided they could adopt that and adapt it into their Norway attraction.
Sure. And if it is a Scandinavian country, it would be one of three: Norway, Finland, or Sweden.
Right.
So it is very cool to see the Frozen ride. Now, I will say I have not actually done the Frozen ride. They're going back to that theme again of what I have and haven't done. The Frozen ride obviously typically has a very long line at this point. It features obviously your favorite characters from Frozen: Elsa, Anna, Kristoff, Sven, Olaf, everything like that. But it has only been the Frozen Ever After attraction for a few years. It was beforehand the Maelstrom, which, Danny, I'll let you talk about that. But the Maelstrom was just a different attraction. I don't know how to describe it. It was an odd one.
Yeah, so Frozen Ever After opened on June 1st, 2016, so just over 2 years ago now. But as you said before that, it was the Maelstrom. Now, unfortunately, I have also not ridden Frozen Ever After because every time we've gone since, it's still suffering from that new ride hype, you could say, in that every time you go there, it's a fairly short, tame boat ride, but the line is still on most days over an hour. And so I think, Brandon, the last time you and I were there together, we walked through and the line was, yeah, it was like 75 minutes. And we said, there's other stuff we want to spend our time doing than ride this new attraction. Especially because, so when they rebranded this ride from Maelstrom to Frozen Ever After, the ride track didn't change at all. They didn't do anything to the ride mechanics. It's still the same. Climb up the long hill, blah, blah, blah. You go backwards. It's still the exact same ride, but they've redressed all the scenery. So now, instead of riding through, and here's that theme again of riding through a historical look at Norway, much like we did in Mexico earlier. So on the Maelstrom, instead of riding that, now you're just riding through the story of Frozen. But yeah, as you go through, you're kind of greeted by the myths and the legends of Norway, from whether it's trolls that send your boat careening off path and maybe you do a backwards drop, maybe, to it brings you up to the modern, well, the 80s modern, the oil rig at the end. This was the 80s. But it was a really delightful attraction and to look through both the fact and the fiction of Norway.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that they really hit on is one of the myths that you would hear about, not just in Norway, but in other countries where maybe the water, the lakes, the oceans played a big role, is you would actually hear about the boats that would sometimes maybe capsize and would never actually be I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. A boat that might be capsized and just somehow go away into an abyss. Sometimes this was known as a circular, dangerous water, almost like a miniature hurricane. And
Right.
that is actually what Maelstrom stood for. It's like a strong current that would start spinning and it would take you into the water. And eventually, there was this myth that a boat or maybe a captain of a boat or something like that, or a person who worked on the sea. The idea behind a maelstrom was that it could be a very large current of water that would be violent and could come out of nowhere, and that if you got caught in the maelstrom, you wouldn't be able to survive it, and neither would your boat.
Right. And I know you are certainly more knowledgeable about world weather patterns, so I would not hesitate to just take you at face value. But I believe if you're picturing kind of a large whirlpool, you wouldn't be too far off the mark, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what the idea was. And to be quite honest, there has never really, at least to my knowledge, been any proof that something like this could happen. You have some very strong ocean currents out there, obviously, and you can have hurricanes, but to my knowledge, a hurricane has never developed any type of whirlpool like that. Now, that is not to discredit the fact that a hurricane or a typhoon or even a tsunami is a very powerful system,
Right.
and no boat or ship or anything should ever try to go through those. But to my
But they're not
knowledge,
going to spin out these maelstrom whirlpools like you see in Pirates of the Caribbean at World's
right.
End. Third
Yeah,
Marine
to
or
my
like that.
knowledge, that is completely mythical and has never actually occurred.
But so that's where kind of the idea came for this Norway attraction, in that these trolls and mythical gods are kind of angry at the humans invading their lands, and so they kind of mess up your boat ride. But eventually humans have to learn to work together with nature, and that's really the whole big beautiful storyline there.
Sure. And so, aside from what was Maelstrom and from what is now Frozen Ever After, the final thing in Norway that I really always notice is the shops there as well when you talk about the merchandise. And I have to give a shout out to our good friend Chris, who has now works as a manager over the merchandise in World Showcase. He's over a couple different countries. I believe Norway still falls under his realm, but they have some really unique winter weather gear that you would never need in Florida. But if you are ever looking for a really nice winter coat or a heavy jacket, that is the place to go. And also, if you are looking for a little smell good, a little perfume, a little cologne,
Yeah.
you have to go check out the Norway Pavilion. All of these unique scents, body sprays that were basically imported from the country, and they smell fantastic.
Yeah, that's gotta be one of the best smelling gift shops in all of Disney World. I absolutely love that when you exit the Maelstrom or the Frozen Ever After attraction, you walk into there. Yeah, but that is also one of my favorite things about the World Showcase is that their gift shops aren't just the standard Disney toys, the Disney plush, the magnets, whatever you can buy at a Disney gift shop. There are actual, not necessarily things from the country per se, but things that might represent the country. So you mentioned in Norway, you can buy big parkas or snow boots and snow gear, which seems like a silly thing to buy in Florida, but they stock some. People must be buying them. And then in Mexico, yeah, you mentioned you can buy quote unquote authentic Mexican heirlooms, little trinkets, and going all the way through, you can buy things that are kind of have real world beauty and value beyond just the Disney logo.
Right. And one other quick little tidbit before we keep moving on about Norway that I did not know that I read about. So, if you're familiar with on the side of the Norway Pavilion, and like you said earlier, I'm going to totally butcher the way that this is pronounced, the Kringla Bakery and Cafe,
Right.
which is in the Norway Pavilion. I'll say it in the English version rather than try to pronounce it the real way. On top of the roof to the bakery and cafe, there is actually real grass growing on top of the roof. So
Yeah.
I have always noticed it, but I didn't realize that it was real grass. And yes, they have horticulture cast members at Disney who come up to the bakery and cafe every so often to actually maintain it, trim the grass, make sure it looks right, and that it is not overgrown at any point.
That makes sense. If they're going to have a grass roof in any park, it makes sense that it would be in Epcot because, of course, once a year they have the Flower and Garden Festival, which is a whole other thing that we'll talk about. We should do an episode on festivals at Epcot alone someday. But so that makes sense that they
Oh,
would have it
sure.
here.
Yeah, that one would definitely be an entire podcast in itself between the Flower and Garden Festival and the Food and Wine Festival. There's so much that happens.
Yeah.
So that kind of covers Norway. And then as you keep strolling along, I'll try to keep us moving along here a little bit. You go
Right.
into China, and I will say, full disclosure, I would say the China Pavilion is the one that I have spent the least amount of time in during my time in World Showcase. So I will go ahead and throw that out there. When you walk into the China Pavilion, it basically screams anything you might think that China would look like. I have never been to the country, so I cannot say for certain, but I know that there are several unique little things inside that pavilion.
Yeah, I think again, China is again a representation of a very traditionalist China. Certainly not what China is or looks like. I mean, it's a great industrial superpower today, but the China Pavilion is very focused on the temples, and you have the main landmark is this big temple of heaven, kind of a round. Well, in reality, it's where they have their 360-degree movie inside called Wonders of China, which is another recurring thing in the World Showcase. These 360-degree films that are, I can't help but wonder as I was doing this research in the advent now of real 360-degree video and cameras that are coming out, how long these attractions are going to last. Because these attractions work in that they dragged essentially like 12 cameras, taped them all together on these gimbals and machines, and just pointed them out 360 degrees. So you have about 12 or so different screens within these movies, and each is an individual projection from that particular camera. Whereas now we have cameras that actually can shoot in all these angles. I wonder how long these attractions are going to last. Canada has another one of these. France has one as well. But that tech notwithstanding and seeing how long it's going to last, it's another beautiful look at the history and culture of China, and led by kind of this mythical, I think it's a Ming Dynasty emperor or scribe or something. But another very common theme in Epcot, a beautiful look at the history and landscape of China. They have some beautiful aerial shots of the mountain ranges in China that I absolutely love.
Yeah, so a unique thing that I found in my research, you mentioned the Temple of Heaven in the China Pavilion. It is not quite the full size of the Temple of Heaven that you would find in Beijing. It's half that size. And one of the things I did not know, and I regret this, and now next time I'm at World Showcase, I must definitely go in here. The temple is designed to be acoustically perfect, which means if you go inside and you speak, period, you say any words, your voice will echo back. And I think that is really cool
Hmm.
because I imagine the one in China does the exact same thing.
That's a fun little thing. I like how Disney does it because they have another spot in Tomorrowland, at least in Disneyland. I haven't actually found it in Disney World, but in Tomorrowland and Magic Kingdom, they have a little spot where if you stand, it'll echo off this one particular thing and come right back at you and sound a little bizarre.
A little activity we can go do next time we are at World
Yeah,
Showcase.
for sure. And now China also has two restaurants, one of which I actually have eaten at. This is one of the few restaurants I took the time to sit down and have a table service at. They have the Nine Dragons restaurant, which is their kind of their full table service, beautiful restaurant. Again, staffed ideally by Chinese cast members. And the Lotus Blossom Cafe, their sort of quick service. I mean, it's like better Chinese takeout.
Yes, I have never eaten at the Nine Dragons, but I have had the Lotus Blossom Cafe several times before. And I will say it is very much like your Chinese takeout restaurant that you might have near home, but it is very great. You should try the orange chicken with the white rice. I think that is probably the meal that I always get.
I think that's
Um,
exactly what I get too. Yeah, that's particularly delicious.
So, and then I have to be honest, that's really what I've done in China is just eat and then typically keep going. I do know they are known for their bubble teas
Mm-hmm.
that you might find in the China Pavilion as well, which obviously is has become a very popular thing. I didn't realize that bubble tea was as popular of a drink to have nowadays, but my sister seems to absolutely love it, and apparently that is what the cool kids drink now.
Oh,
So
it
that
is.
is
Yeah. Speaking as a not cool kid, but who is surrounded by cool kids in New York City. Yeah, it's very much a thing. So good on Disney for catching up with that trend. But China
yeah.
also has one of my favorite gift shops in Epcot. Again, not a Disney gift shop, but their representation of what you might find in a it's kind of like if you're walking through Times Square in New York and you're a tourist from another country and you might buy cool things that maybe represent America but aren't necessarily American, like I think that a real American would use. But they've got beautiful little trinkets and cool lamps, decorated with various Chinese symbols that mean things that I don't understand because I can't read Chinese. And they've got classic, one of their live performances here is they've got an acrobatic troupe that comes out in the gardens out front and does a lot of really cool stunts and tricks. So they've got little toy acrobatic things you can buy. I bought when I was younger, I bought a plate spinning kit. You could learn to spin a plate on top of a stick, or you can buy little classic Chinese dragon marionettes or things like that. I really like these little traditional things you can buy from this particular gift shop.
Yes, and another little thing to point out about the China Pavilion, and I'm going to backtrack just a little bit to Mexico and Norway, is there are character meet and greets everywhere. We did mention the princess dining at the Akershus Banquet Hall, but there are character dinings in just about every, character meet and greets in just about every pavilion. In Mexico, you will often find Donald Duck, who is obviously from the Three Caballeros, and you may see Panchito or Jose with him. In Norway, you do still have a chance to meet Anna and Elsa. And then in China, I have never seen her, but it is rumored, and it is actually on the Walt Disney World website, so I believe it is true, that you can meet Mulan, who holds the movie, obviously, that goes back to Chinese culture and probably one of the best Disney songs of all time.
Yeah, same. I have never actually seen her in China as well. I think this is one of those ones that you need to really pay attention to those blogs and Facebook groups where they just have through the Walt Disney hive mind people saying, Mulan is out here right now. She'll be out here for another 45 minutes. And then everyone rushes over to meet her. Because, yeah, although she is advertised as being there, I've never seen her there.
No, and I hear a rumor that you might be able to catch her with Mushu as well at times. I think that would
Mm.
be pretty spectacular. So if you get a chance to do that, that would be awesome.
That would be pretty cool. But let's move right along to the next country, that being Germany. I hope I'm doing this in the right order. I marked them all down.
Yes,
Okay, yeah,
Germany.
Germany's next. Great. Yeah, so one of the landmarks here is a risen statue of St. George and the Dragon, which is kind of, they kind of like to choose the big architectural centerpieces from each country. And then you also have the And I just like this name, the Der Teddy Bar Shop, which just kind of made me giggle a little bit. And also one of the best caramel shops I think actually the only caramel shop I've ever been to. But man, the good little sweet treats you can buy in there are just exciting.
Yes, wonderful store, wonderful desserts. I think Germany is my favorite pavilion to walk around in and eat and drink because you will just find so many cool things there. My favorite little shop and is the caramel shop. I think it's great.
Yeah. Germany, however, is one of the attractions that doesn't actually have one of the pavilions, excuse me, that doesn't have an attraction. There was a planned attraction further back, and you can kind of see where I think the show building is there, but they never really put anything in it. There was going to be see if you can guess it, a historical ride down the Rhine River. Is going to be a boat attraction, much like the Grand Fiesta Tour in Mexico. But, for budgetary reasons and all that sort of fun stuff, it just never quite happened. But they have a great couple quick service restaurants outside. They've got a little beer garden, literally called a beer garten, if you want to say that with a German accent. They've got a great selection of beers. They've got some, I think, some original kind of Disney-fied beers and drinks here. I'm not too sure about that. But yeah, it's a great little place to stop and maybe get a bratwurst or a pretzel and some caramel and a beer. Just sit out at their little outdoor cafe and take a break there.
Yes, my favorite drink in all of World Showcases in Germany. It is a Schafferhofer, which
That's what I was
is
thinking
a
of. Yep.
grapefruit beer, and it is fantastic. I have discovered, can actually find this Schafferhofer beer possibly at your local grocery store. I live in Iowa, and I have discovered Schafferhofer here, which means I have a little taste of World Showcase whenever I want.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that's nice. Yeah, and I think they have it on tap there. But yeah, there's really not much else going on in Germany. So let's move right along to Italy, which is one of my favorite pavilions because of just kind of the sheer size of it. You can go way back, and it's set in Venice at the Doge's Palace and Bell Tower. And it just this one just seems it feels bigger than the other ones. Am I wrong in that?
I do think it is a little bit farther back. It is a little bit deeper, which you mentioned. You can go all the way to the back, and I think that it really represents kind of, like you mentioned, it is kind of based off Venice, this large Italian square. And one of the cool things that you will find actually in the Italy Pavilion, as I do all this research and see different things, there are little red buttons that you can find near the fountains in different areas around the Italy Pavilion. If you press one of those buttons, water sprays out of them. Why water sprays
Yeah,
out of them, why they have this, I'm not sure, but it's a good way to cool off.
just another little Easter egg there, kind of like a hidden Mickey. You're right. I forgot about that. That's a fun little thing. But yeah, they have a couple restaurants in here. Of course, it's Italy. How could they not? They also have a wine cellar towards the back, which I haven't done because, as I said, I'm not really one for drinking in Disney at least. But they have Tutto Italia Ristorante, which opened in 2007, which was a rebranding of. I'm going to butcher this, L'Original Alfredo di Roma Ristorante back there, and a good classic selection of Italian food, which I think is a pretty safe bet on Disney's part. Everyone likes Italian.
Yes, and then Via Napoli, which is the other newer restaurant that
Mm-hmm.
you'll find in Italy. And they have some wonderful pizzas with prosciutto on top, and even one that has cantaloupe on top, and it is
Yeah.
perfect.
Italy is another one without a particular attraction, though, although they do have great live performances. There's a mime there that I particularly like. However, they did plan on building a whole little area, I guess, representing southern Italy and the Roman ruins, which I thought would have been really cool. And then maybe, there were whispers of there were maybe going to be an attraction in there, but who can say? Either way, it didn't happen. And that's so what we have today. We have in Venice, and it's again not too much to do here, but I love it.
I do love the live performers. You will find the groups here that do and I don't know the proper name for them, but they're dancers, and they wear their red dresses, and it takes you to what you might imagine you would find closer to something like the Roman Colosseum. And they're really wonderful. They're funny. They do a little skit, so that kind of goes along with the mime
Okay.
as well.
I don't think I've ever actually seen those. One of the problems with having this at World Showcase is so huge, and that they'll have these performances listed in the Times Guide or on the app now, I guess. But because it's so huge, people just kind of tend to walk through, and if there's a performance happening, they'll stay and watch. But I don't think anybody actually goes and seeks out these performances because it takes
Right.
45 minutes just to get to one of these pavilions sometimes.
Sure. And yeah, so that kind of covers Italy. They have little gift shops just like any of the other ones. And then you walk along and you're going to be kind of stopped by the next country, which I think throws some people off. I think as you go, you've experienced all of these countries from around the world, and then bam, you come into the pavilion that is called the American Adventure, and it represents the United States of America. And I know that this has, at least from people I've talked to, thrown a lot of people off. But I think what Disney's original goal behind it was, you have so many people that come and visit Walt Disney World from all over the world. So they come to Orlando, which I love Orlando, Florida. It's a place that I hold near and dear to my heart, but it's not your traditional American city.
Long
Doesn't
shot.
scream the United States of America like something like New York City or Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. might. And I think that's the goal behind the American Adventure Pavilion.
Yeah, this is another very traditional representation of America. They have a Georgian mansion inside. And the attraction, oh, why am I blanking on the name of the attraction right now? Help me out.
The attraction is actually also the American
Oh,
Adventure.
that's why I didn't feel the need to write it twice in my notes. Yeah. So the attraction, also called the American Adventure, it's a little tour through American history with Ben Franklin and Mark Twain. And so, yeah, as you said, it's, although all these people are in America, if you're in Florida, you're not really getting the traditional look at America like you are with these 10 other countries.
Right. So you kind of walk into this traditional colonial style looking pavilion that obviously, when I walk into it, to me, it screams, I am in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which
Right.
obviously was one of the most original cities in the United States. And oh, goodness, my American history is not as good as it should be. But I do believe that the Philadelphia was at one time the nation's capital, or at the very least was where the Declaration of Independence was signed. So the actual USA Pavilion, the building there, is a lot bigger than it actually looks on the outside. So inside, it is 5 stories tall, but outside, it looks as if it is only 3. And they use these, in the Disney sense, they use these large doors and windows to make it look like it's a smaller house from the outside, or a smaller building, but it actually is really big inside. They used 110,000 actual handmade bricks to build the building. And one of the most famous things from the state of Georgia, they used Georgia red clay to hold it together. And I think that is a tribute to the 13 original colonies, which the one main colony that was in the South was Georgia at the time.
A really good collection, a good amalgamation of all the original colonies and representation of the traditional America. They also have some great live performances outside. They have the Fife and Drum Corps, which is, again, if you want to picture like a Yankee Doodle Revolutionary America fife and drum band marching down, they have a little performance that comes out here. They also have an actual outdoor concert stage outside, which is where, when they do have some of their festivals, which we'll talk about at a later date, they have a lot of tribute bands performing here. Disney never actually manages to get the real bands, I've noticed, for some reason, but they do have a lot of tribute bands that will perform in this outdoor concert venue, and it's a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. And obviously, you will go inside. And speaking of live entertainment, one of my favorite shows that for some reason none of my friends ever want to join me to watch, The Voices of Liberty,
Yeah.
which are absolutely phenomenal. It is a group of singers that sings patriotic songs in a very round table style. I guess you could almost compare it to an a cappella group, because they don't use instruments and they have absolutely wonderful voices. You'll hear traditional patriotic songs, and you go inside the American Pavilion inside the building, and you'll actually just sit down on the floor. And it is a very I love it. I don't know why I don't know how to describe it. They sing Christmas songs. It's perfect.
It is a beautiful, yeah, it absolutely is a little a cappella group, and they come out, and this is another one of those buildings that Disney has built to be very acoustically correct, in that if they stand in their particular spot and the echo of their voices kind of lends itself and they sound larger than life. And yeah, you sit on the ground, you lean on the pillars, and you watch them. I think this is, going back to a second, another one of the problems, though, in that, if you don't happen to be there at the right time, this is the dead center of the World Showcase, the American Adventure. This is what you see when you walk into Epcot and for a SeaWorld Showcase. So if you're trying to get there just for the show, it's a long walk all the way around.
Exactly. And of course, inside you also have the American Adventure Show, which we have talked about briefly. A little tidbit that I learned in my research, obviously, the American Adventure is designed to give you just a unique little look at the history of the United States. You have to go up to the second floor of the building to watch the show.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that there's a specific reason why. All of the animatronics that you will see in the show, the presidents, every other figure that appears, are actually housed on hidden platforms and they're stored underneath the audience.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense because I remember when you watch this, they make use of what appears to be stage elevators. It is just animatronics being raised up and down, but they're it start out and animatronics come up and do the little thing in front of you on the stage, and you start thinking, oh, that's cute. They've got all these little animatronics right beneath the stage there, but then so many different animatronics start to come out. You begin to wonder where they could possibly be keeping all these things. So they're right underneath you. That's interesting.
They are underneath you. So that is why you have to traverse all the way up to the second story for that attraction.
Yes, and I also want to mention the American Adventure. There's a good little quick service restaurant right next to it that just serves kind of classic Americana, like sandwiches and hamburgers, food. It's fine, but this is also the only place in Epcot, unless they've just expanded this without telling me. It's the only place in Epcot where you can buy a funnel cake. I think in true American fashion, you got the biggest, sugariest, craziest dessert in the American Adventure.
I believe that is, like you said, traditional USA. Everyone in their uncle has tried a funnel cake before, whether it be at the carnival or you bring back memories as a kid of going to the state fair or a county fair or anything like that. And you maybe even at the ball games sometimes, and
Yeah.
you would have the traditional funnel cake.
Yeah. And so I think the American Adventure, especially after the recent controversy that happened over the Hall of Presidents, and whether or not to put in President number 45, Mr. Trump, it feels like a relatively safe attraction in that it's because it is a traditional look at American history, it's pretty far removed from any of the political climate happening right now in the real world and the diplomatic relationships with the other countries that may be surrounding it. So you got China a few pavilions away, and whether or not America has great relationship with China today doesn't really matter because this is a traditional look. It has no bearing on what's happening here. And I mean, what a mess Disney got themselves in with that whole will they, won't they add Trump to the Hall of Presidents. And you won't have that problem here.
Yes, no, you won't because this actually goes pre Civil War, I mean, it goes back all the way to the founding of the United States and when we had the, Englishmen that came over and settled in the United States on both Plymouth Rock and in Jamestown, Virginia. And they said, well, we are going to, kind of go back and look at that history. So, yes, it doesn't have the same controversy that the Hall of Presidents does, which is good because I don't think we will see any significant changes to the American Adventure anytime soon. So, moving forward, as you go past the American Adventure, you're going to hop over into Japan. And I think what signals that you are in Japan always is the sound of drums.
Yes. Yeah, I was actually going to talk about these performers. These live, it's called a taiko drum performers that are. Well, I'll let you talk about them. You brought them up.
Well, I don't know much about them, but I do know that when you are walking into Japan, you're going to hear these loud drums, and you'll always find somebody out there. And typically, the performer is very serious, very intense with what they're doing. But it reminds me, for those who know anything about an orchestra or a band, it reminds me similar to the sound of a timpani drum.
Yeah.
And it's just to me when I hear it, I'm like, oh wow, we are in Japan.
It is incredibly loud and a very impressive instrument, especially when they have, I think it's all four performers out on the big temple, the pagoda called forgive me for butchering this name, it's called the Goju Noto. Please don't hold that against me. I don't know how to pronounce that. But they have them all out performing there and playing on various drums, sizing up there, and it's really, really loud. And they're good. These performers they didn't just like hire people and teach them to play drums. These are professional taiko drum players, and they are very, very impressive.
They are fantastic. Obviously, you mentioned they're outside on the pagoda, which is 5 stories high. Each one of those stories represents one of the elements that people who are Buddhist believe make up everything in the universe. So from bottom to top, it stands for earth, water, fire, wind, and sky. And that is the exact reason why there are only 5 stories on
That's
it.
fantastic. That's great. They also have kind of opposites from that, and I'll see if you know significance. So here they have kind of in the World Showcase Lagoon this big red gate. They have the Torii. I believe I'm probably mispronouncing that again, but it's called the Gate of Honor, and through which you can kind of look out and see the rest of the world.
Yes, and I do believe that was actually a gift to Walt Disney World from the government of Japan. And it was actually gifted to Walt Disney World when Magic Kingdom opened.
Hmm.
And it was obviously eventually placed in Epcot.
So, do you then feel safe to say that this gate is one of the few things in World Showcases actually authentically from that country and not built by Disney Imagineers?
I would say so. One thing I will point out is that when Disney Imagineers created each of these pavilions, they did bring in consultants from these countries. They did actually go to these countries and take a look at the architecture and take a look at the, things that you might find there to make it as authentic. But I would say yes, since this was a direct gift from the government of Japan, I would think it's probably, if not the most authentic, definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. They also Japan has another one of the great gift shops we were talking about. I mean, Japanese pop culture has been and is popular and has been for a very long time now. So they have this great, huge gift shop selling all sorts of things, ranging from various manga characters, comic book. I think they sell some Pokemon in there. Honestly, I'm not sure how they got the rights for this to sell them in Disney World, but a great mesh. You can also, they have a little celebration thing in there. You can get a pearl out of an oyster. They have live oysters in this tank there, and these attendants will crack open or show you or help you crack open the pearls inside there.
Yes, and another thing you will find in Japan is bubble tea. Again, you will find that over there. You will also find sticky rice and hot sake, which I have never had, but I am told it is quite an experience.
Yeah, I've never had hot sake. I've had regular sake, but hot sake I bet is really good. They have,
And I
yeah, they've got
do
these beautiful kind of koi ponds over on the left side, and they've got some kind of quick service and a bunch of carts out here selling various Japanese sodas or snacks, which are again becoming more and more mainstream in the U.S. But they've been selling these here for 20 years or so, and it was always fun to go over there and buy those little sodas. You have to pop the little marble out of the top, and you could walk around drinking that.
Yes, I do have a little fun story quickly about Japan. One of Danny and I's former roommates, Nick, he and I were in the Japan pavilion having lunch one day, and we ordered sushi. And this shows you how uncultured I was at the time. And I promise I have done some research and some studying. We were served our sushi, and in traditional Japanese form, on the side, you had a little bit of the green stuff,
Of the green stuff,
which
yeah.
yes. So you will get this, and now I can't even think of the name of it. I had it at the top of my tongue.
Wasabi.
Yes, wasabi. I don't know why I couldn't think of that.
Yep, that's
You will get
okay.
some wasabi. And as anyone who knows anything about wasabi, you are not really supposed to eat it.
Not by itself, no.
No. And what did Brandon do? Brandon decided he would eat the entire thing of wasabi by
Oh
itself just to
no.
see what it tasted like. And let's just say that was a
Did you
mistake.
think it was guacamole or something?
No, I knew it wasn't guacamole. I just thought maybe it was a little bit tamer than it tasted. I thought maybe it was just a little sauce. I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it was like a
Oh my
mayonnaise.
god,
And clearly, I was an uncultured U.S. citizen.
you're pulling like a jackass stunt or something. I think isn't, I don't know if you've seen one of the ones like Steve-O snorts wasabi or something disgusting like that.
Yes.
Well, at least you only
But,
ate it, but my god, my condolences to you and yours for that mistake.
so I most definitely learned my lesson there in Japan, and keeping us moving along. As you go from Japan, you enter the world of Morocco, which I think is also one of the larger pavilions. You mentioned that Italy is large. Morocco seems to be large. It reminds me very much of this open air market something you might see as you roll through, or maybe as you're watching like the movie Aladdin. It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, this is again, yeah, whether or not this is actually larger or not, it certainly feels like Disney's master of creating things that are seem larger than they actually are. But this is, as I mentioned earlier, with Norway, the second of the two pavilions that opened up after the rest of the World Showcase opened. This opened in 1984. Which was the first pavilion added afterwards. And this one you mentioned in some of the earlier pavilions, they had consultants come in and they obviously did their research really well. They did their homework. But this pavilion was actually the architecture was done. The king at the time, Hassan II, sent over actual Moroccan architects, excuse me, and they came over and actually really designed this with the Imagineers rather than the Imagineers studying it and designing it themselves. Real Moroccans designed this pavilion.
And one of the unique things, a couple things you will find inside the Moroccan pavilion, you will find the mosaic tiles all over the pavilion. One cool thing to find that I found out is that each mosaic, if you look at it very closely, has at least one tile that doesn't match. It's got an error, it has some kind of issue, because beliefs in Morocco state that only Allah can create something that is totally perfect. So therefore they purposefully created a little bit of an error. Another thing is that you will find at night during illuminations, reflections of Earth, you will find at night in general that all of the World Showcase pavilions are lit up with
Yes.
lights except for Morocco. And that remains dark because local religious beliefs in Morocco say that it should remain dark at night.
Oh, really? I actually hadn't clocked that. I'm a little embarrassed that I hadn't noticed that before. That's pretty cool, though. But yeah, the rest of the countries will light up. And there's, again, Morocco full of great and beautiful little gift shops that sell items representing Morocco. There's a great restaurant outside called Restaurant Marrakesh. That's really, I think this is one of the only real waterfront dining options in Epcot. This is actually kind of opposite the path from the rest of the Morocco Pavilion. You can sit right there on the World Showcase Lagoon and watch the pyrotechnics setting up illuminations for the night.
Yes, another very cool thing, and probably my favorite thing to take note of with Morocco, is you will notice that there is what appears to be a very large Moroccan tower if you're looking at it from a distance.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's actually Disney strategically constructing things so that when you're looking straight on at the Morocco Pavilion, you can actually see the towering Twilight Zone Tower of Terror behind it over at Hollywood Studios. It actually peaks over the top of the Morocco Pavilion, so they designed certain decorations, certain architecture there to make it blend in. So it looks like there's this very large tower in Morocco, when in reality, it's actually the Tower of Terror.
Oh, that's so cool. That's yeah, actually I had heard that before. That's really funny because I mean Epcot and Hollywood Studios are deceptively close. You can actually walk between the two of them if you don't mind doing like a 20-minute or half-hour walk. But that's right. I had forgotten that. That's pretty cool.
You can walk through them. You can also take the friendship boat. There are a lot of cool things. And we talk about also the character meet and greets. You can meet Aladdin and Jasmine inside Morocco, hence why I said that earlier. And another interesting thing that I learned, there's so many unique things about Morocco, and actually I wanted to try to find the description about it, is that there is a portion of the sidewalk between Morocco and France. So we're going to kind of move along to France here in just a minute. I'm finding the details on this now. There's a portion that is intended, the sidewalk gets darker in color. And the whole point of this is that it is supposed to represent the Strait of Gibraltar, which is a little narrow piece of water, a little narrow body of water, where it actually runs between Spain and Morocco, the Strait of Gibraltar does. And so the walkway is intended to show that. Obviously, that's a little bit geographically incorrect if it goes from Morocco to France versus Morocco to Spain, but still pretty cool that they even designed their walkways for that.
Yeah, that they included that at all is pretty cool, and that they found a way to represent that even though they don't necessarily have the correct countries. But yeah, you mentioned that the next country moving around in our tour of World Showcase is France. And we kind of get into the next three countries are kind of three of the more familiar countries, I think, out of these groups. So it's, they aren't like as exotic as Norway or China or Morocco. So France's big landmark, see if you can guess it, it's the Eiffel Tower. Duh.
Yes, and it is not quite as large as the Eiffel Tower in Paris, of course, but still, it is by far, I think, the most iconic thing anyone ever thinks of when they think of
Yes,
France.
this is yeah. They follow their rules in Disney World of not building anything in the theme parks over 200 feet, because if they build anything over 200 feet in the theme parks, they have to put those flashing red lights on top of them to warn aircraft that you got this tall object here. And so that's why you will never see anything in Disney World over 200 feet. Expedition Everest is 199 feet and 6 inches, kind of really close there, but nothing actually goes taller than that. But so France has the Impression de France. Oh boy, I need to stop trying to do these accents. But Impressions of France. Impressions of France, which is a 180-degree film going through, which I watched clips of on YouTube just to refresh my memories. It's been a while since I've done this. And this particular attraction looks like it hasn't been updated since this attraction opened in the 80s. It's you get all the hairstyle and fashion as they look through, again, a tour of France and its history and its culture and its landscapes. But it looks like it's a little dated now, getting a little old.
And I think obviously it really is got this goal of reminding you of the French countryside, which I think so many people forget. Everyone thinks of France as just Paris. And while Paris is a major world city and a major tourist attraction, I think France is, a lot of the country is really well known for its beautiful countryside. And that is actually what the movie Beauty and the Beast is based off of, is these little French towns, these little French areas where you see the countryside.
Yeah, the beautiful French country, or the skiing. It really does focus on a lot of these movies are kind of. I mean, these pavilions were originally intended to be sponsored by the countries as almost giant advertisements for tourists to come and visit the countries after this. That never really panned out. The countries never really ended up sponsoring anything. But this one really does work in that it's the video really is a lot of great tourist attractions in France. And I mean, it certainly makes me want to go visit France after watching it. It works.
Yes, and a couple cool little things, or a neat little thing to note about the Eiffel Tower. There is a little bit of an illusion on the height of it. So I have researched this, and I saw that if a bird were to land on top of the Eiffel Tower, the one in the France Pavilion, it would actually ruin that illusion of the height. The tower is wide at the bottom and pretty narrow at the top. So apparently, if a bird perched on top, it would look very enormous at the top. And that is not supposed to be that way, of course. So Disney actually has natural, quote unquote, bird deterrence up at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And it is intended to, unfortunately, scare them away.
I wonder what that natural, quote unquote, bird deterrence is. That'll be interesting to find out.
Just something you find at your local Home Depot.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, nothing sinister created in those weird warehouses behind Magic Kingdom. No, I'm sure it's not harming them at all. They're really good about their animal conservation. They also, of course, France has a couple of great restaurants. One of them being Chef de France. Again, fantastic French food and staffed by fully French servers. I remember one of them. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and she pointed out that I spoke a little bit of French in high school, and so the servers kind of looked at me expectantly, and I had to suffer through some badly memorized French from years before, and I got the very very stereotypical kind of French condescending look, and I was suitably embarrassed, and then we had a delicious meal.
And you go over to the French bakery and you will find some wonderful things. The macaroons, of course, you have to have.
Yeah. I mean, this is a particularly delicious pavilion. It's France.
Yes. Wonderful food. And speaking of character meet and greets, you can find those in France as well. You can often find Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Occasionally, the Beast will make an appearance with her. And you can also see Aurora.
Yes, this one you see pretty frequently. Belle, at least. And Aurora, no, I've seen Aurora too. We were talking about Mulan earlier and how she's kind of really... I'm knocking things over here. But how she was kind of really difficult to find in China. Belle, it seems like, is always out. You can always see her, and she's always got a big line.
Yes, I have had the opportunity to meet Belle and the Beast and Aurora in France, so those are definitely ones that you can find. And that really gives you an interesting look at France. Then you kind of go around this curve and you almost walk up a little hill as you make your way into the United Kingdom.
Yeah, but actually, before we get there, between France and the United Kingdom, and you mentioned it briefly, is the International Gateway, which is something that's pretty unique to this park. It's, as far as I can tell, and I think I'm correct in this, it's the only park with a back entrance, actually. And this lets out into the Epcot Resort area. We've got the Boardwalk, the Yacht and Beach Club resorts, and their whole little lake surrounding there. You can also catch the friendship boats to all of those resorts, as well as Hollywood Studios, which you mentioned earlier. And it's a fully functioning park entrance and exit. Anybody can come in here if they want to. There's no really parking there. It's not terribly convenient, but it's interesting that this park has two entrances, one right letting you out into the middle of World Showcase.
Yes, and I will say it is a very good tip if you are looking to avoid some crowds. That is a great way to come into the park
Yeah.
because you will virtually never wait in line back there. And the idea behind the water back there is actually to represent the English Channel, which of course runs between the United Kingdom and
Mm-hmm.
France, which makes sense.
Yeah, and so then that moves us on to we're nearing our end of the Grand World Tour here, but you come up in the United Kingdom, which is one of my favorite pavilions. I've got some British heritage, so I think it's just cute and funny, and it's made up of several idealized British streets, being Tudor Lane, High Street, and Upper and Lower Regency streets, which are famous streets in London. You've got a great little waterside pub kind of as you're entering in. If you're coming from France, it's one of the first things that you see. If you're coming from Canada, it's one of the last things that you see. And at this pub, they sell great fish and chips on false newspaper, because that's how you're supposed to eat fish and chips. It's wrapped up in newspaper. So they have great little food dining there. They've got great shops where you can go and look up your family crest if you are so lucky to have one. They've got meet and greets with, I believe you can find Wendy out here, and there's someone else out here. Who else? Oh, Mary Poppins. You can meet Mary Poppins out here a lot. This is one of the
And Alice from Alice in
and
Wonderland
Alice.
often makes an appearance.
You're right. That's what I was forgetting. None of whom are really particularly popular meet and greets at any of the other parks. This is one of those. I mean, especially not Mary Poppins. I can't think of anywhere else you can meet her.
No, I believe this is the only
Yeah.
location.
And then just behind the Yorkshire County Fish Shop, which is that waterside pub, you have the Rose and Crown Pub, which is an actual full table service restaurant. Again, I've never been in here. There are so many table service restaurants. You can't make it to all of them, but I'm sure it's delicious, and it looks cute. It's very it's got that brown mahogany, oaky, woody feel that you might expect from an older British pub. It's a really cute little restaurant, and I just hope they have good food. I couldn't tell you though.
I will say they do a nice job in the United Kingdom of trying to combine all elements of the United Kingdom, not just the look that London may have. But as you probably know, the United Kingdom is actually divided into what I would probably say are provinces. I don't know if that's the proper term out there, but there are four provinces. Of course, you have Northern Ireland, you have Wales, Scotland, and England. And I think they do a good job with trying to incorporate all aspects
Yeah,
of that.
and you can call those are each fully independent countries. But yeah, they do represent all the four countries pretty well.
Yes, and I want to mention you can also see and I can't think of the name of them right now, but in the backside of the United Kingdom Pavilion, a really cool live entertainment is a Beatles tribute band.
Oh, there is. Yeah, I don't know their name either, because there are just so many little tribute bands that come in and out of here. But yeah, this is another one of those great tribute band locations. Again, another pavilion without any particular attraction, just kind of shops and restaurants, which, we should talk in a second about how the reputation Epcot has got as kind of the adults park because of this huge section of the park. But we have one last pavilion to get to before we complete our World Tour showcase, and it is Canada, our neighbor to the north, in which you'll notice that you're leaving from America when you first enter World Showcase, and you have two options. You can either go into Canada or you can go into Mexico, our two bordering countries. And I mean, that was done on purpose.
Yes. Canada is just it's a really neat pavilion in that it reminds me of what I imagine the Pacific Northwest is like a lot. So it highlights a lot of the culture of like the totem poles and the traditional music and things like that you might find over in British Columbia or actually closer to Alaska.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in Canada. I've got a lot of family up there. So you're right. It doesn't, but I spent a lot of time in East Coast Canada. So you're right. It doesn't necessarily feel like East Coast Canada, although those totem poles, I can say, are really spot on to the totem poles that I've seen up in Canada. But this really does feel like you're out in West Coast, probably British Columbia, a little bit in the Rockies. If you go towards the back of the pavilion, they have a huge rock work with waterfalls coming down and little streams running through. And that's kind of your entrance into the Canada attraction. But it's a beautiful piece of rock work back there. That really transports you. And you can't see back into World Showcase at all. You're totally immersed in this Rocky Mountain-esque vibe back there.
And actually, speaking of the rocks, you can look very closely. And at the top, some of them will open, and there is sound and lighting equipment inside that is all used during illuminations.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never seen that. I haven't actually been in there during illuminations. But yeah, so they've got some of the landmarks within Canada. You have the Hotel du Canada, which is a famous hotel in Canada. You've got the Victoria Gardens. If you walk kind of past Canada back towards Future World and Epcot, they have these beautiful rolling gardens full of flowers and greenery. That's a really kind of a tranquil moment if you want it. Oh, you know what we didn't even talk about? We didn't talk about that model train set in Germany. We didn't bring that up at all.
You got that one
Yeah, that
randomly.
just occurred to me right now. There's a great little model train set in Germany with a bunch of trains running around little German towns. Okay, anyway, Canada. But yeah, Canada has these beautiful Victoria Gardens. And you know what I found out that we actually missed, or maybe I had when I was a kid, but I forgot. There is something called Trapper Bob's that closed in 2004. So, I was too young to kind of go independently to Epcot. That sold a flat donut-like pastry with a variety of toppings, vanilla, chocolate sprinkles, anything like that. And man, I wish that was still there. That sounds really good.
Interesting. I don't remember that one, but yes, now that sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
And then O Canada is the attraction. It's another 360-degree circle vision, as they call it. It's a circle vision attraction back through that Canadian rockwork. This is actually one of the attractions that I love the queue for, the line. There's nothing really happening, but they really managed to create that atmosphere of you're in a cabin, you're in a cottage. It really smells woodsy. All the benches are made of, I mean, it's not real wood, but again, Disney using their smellitizers and managing to pump smells into places. It's a really, really just beautiful, calming smell and feeling back there. And it's never too crowded, this attraction back there. It's another tranquil moment.
No, and I do love it. It's hosted by Martin Short,
Mm-hmm.
and it is just a really cool look at Canada. And I think it's really a different attraction in that there are no seats inside and you stand. And
Yeah.
I will say, if you have been standing for a little while, it is a 360 film. It can make you a little dizzy if you're not prepared
Yeah,
for
which
it.
is the case for most of these 360 films. You got the one in China and Germany and Canada. There aren't like swivel seats for you to turn around. You kind of stand there and keep your head going all the way around. But yeah, you mentioned they added Martin Short when they updated it in 2007. And there's not too much to say about this attraction that hasn't been said about the other attractions already. It's a tour and look at the history of Canada and the culture of the landscape, much like pretty much every other attraction in Epcot.
But I think they each do a good job of giving each guest a look at the country. I think for me, I have never traveled outside of the United States. I've not been fortunate enough to do that before. I'm hoping that one day I will see all of these countries in person. But I have to say, it gives you this really good look at what those countries are like. And I think it gives people a perspective that they may never get. There are people who will never get to see Japan, or who will never get to see China, or who may never get to see Norway. And I think this is as close as they're going to get. And I think it's really, that's the goal that Disney is trying to achieve there is, here is a look at the world around you, even if you will never have an opportunity to really go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Disney really accomplishes that, and now one thing I was hesitant is I would hear people saying, "Oh, well, I've seen World Showcase, therefore I know this country." And as I've been careful to say sometimes at this podcast, these are all traditional representations of the country. They are not at all meant to be how they are currently in the contemporary form. And of course, you can never fully understand a country from just the pavilion. But as you mentioned, for someone who doesn't have the means or the ability to travel to these countries, it is a great idealized representation of what this country might feel like.
Sure, these were never intended to be replacements for visiting the actual country. Like I said, I have never seen them, therefore, I don't really feel like I have ever been to these countries. I feel like I have a really good idea of what I would love to see when I am there one day. And I think that it really, what World Showcase did for me is it sparked that travel mindset even more. I've always enjoyed traveling, but it really sparked that, oh, wow, there's a great big world out there, and it's something I want to achieve. And another thing that they did with that is, and this will be another topic for another podcast, but Soarin', which is now Soarin' Around the World, which used to be Soarin' Around California, captures the essence of so many of the world's greatest landscapes and sights to see, and it really just going to Epcot makes you want to travel the world.
Yeah, which actually kind of leads us in nicely to the reputation that Epcot kind of had and is working really hard to get rid of now. That it's not as much of a kid-friendly park. Not that anything's inappropriate or that sort of not kid-friendly, but just that we talked about all these attractions, pavilions rather, and not all of them have attractions. And the ones that do have attractions, or you just kind of stand there and watch a film, with the exception of Nora, which has an actual ride. And so Epcot has been working really hard to make World Showcase more kid accessible. And whether that's from their doing things like they had the Kim Possible adventure, which has now become the Perry the Platypus little detective game where you get to go through all the little pavilions as a kid and get your banner, your Perry the Platypus little piece of paper stamped and sort of like a little scavenger hunt, finding them all throughout the areas, or creating these live entertainment that might be more interesting to kids, but it's definitely going to be a challenge for Epcot to create a really attractive environment in World Showcase that will draw in younger people.
Yeah. There is one other thing that they have for kids that I actually did when I was a kid. It's called KidCot Fun Stops. And there's a little location in each country, in each pavilion, where when you start your journey through World Showcase, you can actually buy a little passport and you can take it around the world with you. And you can go up to these KidCot Fun Stops and they will give you different little stickers and stamps that you can put inside the passport, and you'll find someone from that country who will actually write a message in your passport proving that you were there, and it will be in their native language. So I have the passport still, and I have little messages from someone that is written in French, a little message from someone that is actually written in Chinese with the traditional
Yeah.
symbols. And so I think that that's cool, maybe for someone who's not a small child, but who maybe is not quite to the teenager level yet. I think that was a
No,
really
it's
cool
definitely
thing.
a cool souvenir. I mean, I did this just to try it, when I was in Epcot one day. And, they'll also write your name in these other characters, these other languages. And it's a really cool souvenir to take home. I want to talk about, moving on. I'm going to try to move through this. This is turning out to be a very long episode. But some of the unrealized pavilions that were, you mentioned this at the top of the show, pavilions that were in the plans or in the works and just didn't happen. And so I have three pavilions here that were actually advertised in the promotional material for Epcot back in the early 1980s. And for one reason, it just never happened. The first of them being Spain, which you mentioned we didn't get Spain, the Morocco and the Strait of Gibraltar there. Spain was going to feature two attractions. There's going to be another film about the vacation spots all throughout the country. But then they were actually going to have a ride. No specifics on what type of ride it was supposed to be, but a ride about Spain's heritage and the arts in Spain, which is something that we don't see a lot of, apart from Japan, which has a beautiful art gallery in the back. We don't see a lot of the actual art of these countries. I thought that would have been really nice.
Yeah, Spain would have been great. I have heard also a rumor that Disney has confirmed that they are intending to add another
Mm-hmm.
pavilion in the near future. And there have been rumors that that would be Spain because there was going to be a movie that would be coming out in 2020, kind of resembling Jack and the Beanstalk, but a more modernized version of that.
Okay.
And I actually just read that that entire film has been tabled at this point. They are not continuing with the plans for that film,
Wow.
at least at this point. So I imagine that also means that the Spain Pavilion idea has been tabled a little bit as
Yeah.
well.
Well, that's the problem with theme parks is you never know. I mean, it's a constantly evolving plan. Another one of the pavilions that was never quite built would be actually Israel. That would be kind of centered on ancient Jerusalem, built around this giant ancient minaret, which I think, regardless of what your views on Jerusalem are, I think this would have been an attraction that would have ended up being a little bit politicized, and they could have had a bit of the same mess they had with the Donald Trump in Hall of Presidents. So I think that would have been a really touchy pavilion. I think they might have dodged a bullet by not building that there.
I agree. I think that, it would have been unique. I think that, one of the things that makes, and this is without me getting into my own personal beliefs in many ways, but I think one of the things that would make someone a well rounded citizen is regardless of what your religion may be or whether you are religious or not, you should, at least to a degree, understand other religions. So I could have seen a really big benefit in having Israel because you would have gotten Christianity and likely Judaism that you could have, really learned a little bit more about. But I do agree. I think it would have become somehow controversial at some point.
Absolutely. I think building a country that has been in a decades long war uh, is just an invitation to. It's an invitation for some harsher discussion, I think. And then the final pavilion that we already mentioned a little bit, that was going to be between China and Germany, where the outpost is now, was Equatorial Africa, where we talked about this already, but they're going to have a treehouse like architecture. They're going to try to recreate some of the smells, whatever that means, of Africa, and they're going to have two shows about these countries that spread across the equator throughout Central Africa.
Yes, and there are, of course, all the rumors that swirl around what countries may be coming. Spain is obviously one of the ones that has been rumored for a long time. We've also heard rumors about Puerto Rico. However, I'm not so sure if that's going to happen since Puerto Rico is not actually its own country, but rather a U.S.
Right.
territory. And most notably, the biggest, I think, rumor is Brazil. And I think if they were to open one, I could see Brazil for sure happening because we don't actually have a country from South America yet.
No, we don't. Despite having a huge number of tourists coming from Brazil and various South American countries, they don't have anywhere they can go and see that is their own in there.
Right. So I could definitely see Brazil being a future pavilion that would open. Apparently, it would theme, around a Brazilian steakhouse. There has been that rumor. There
Oh, I can
has
get behind that.
been rumors that there would not be a major ride for that one. And then there are lots of different rumors out there that I have seen. There's been a rumor that they might eventually create a Big Hero 6 ride
Mm-hmm.
that would be in the Japan pavilion. I'm not so sure that that would happen because they're already building something like that at Tokyo Disneyland. And I don't know that Big Hero 6 was very popular in the United States.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, whenever Disney releases just a straight movie, straight meaning not a musical, it never does quite as well as their big musicals. I mean, even Inside Out, which was I think one of their best Pixar releases lately, hasn't it hasn't blown up to the degree that Coco or Moana or Frozen did.
Sure. And, part of that may be that there's a character in each of those that you really become attached to. So in Frozen, it's Anna and Elsa. And in Coco, it is the young boy. So I think that, maybe that's perhaps why something like Inside Out struggled a little more, even though I 100% agree with you. It was a phenomenal movie. So there's a lot of rumors on what could happen as far as Epcot's next pavilion would go, and we will wait and see what Disney announces.
Yeah, and I want to talk about some stuff that used to be in World Showcase, but is no more. One of the biggest things is their parade that they used to have. They created for the Millennium. It was called the Tapestry of Nations originally, later renamed to the Tapestry of Dreams after the 2000-year celebration. It was Epcot's first and only parade that had a really great soundtrack. You can get it. You can buy it on. I think it comes on the CD still that they sell of the Illuminations soundtrack. It's got this 25-minute track of Tapestry of Nate Dreams. Beautiful parade that kind of came out, started way in the back of World Showcase and did a loop around. The only problem with it was that as beautiful it was and as much of world coming together, it didn't feature any of the Disney characters. It had huge puppets and really impressive rotating floats and stuff, but it didn't feature any Disney characters. And it was a very repetitive parade, strangely. You can watch it all online, but the floats all kind of began to feel the same after a little bit. And the puppets were all kind of pretty similar too. So this didn't last for too long. Closed in the early 2000s. I would have loved to have seen it, but just didn't make it. Didn't cut it.
Yes, and one of the original theme song for the Tapestry of Nations that you'll hear still that you can find out there is absolutely a beautiful song. So I do hate that I missed out on that one. Another thing that they used to have in World Showcase was this large double decker bus
Yeah.
that would take characters around World Showcase, dozens of characters for just this large meet and greet character palooza. And I mean, everything from the classics to the princesses, they would pile on a bunch of characters. That does no long this does not happen anymore
No,
either.
yeah, and that came out for Mickey's 60th birthday, began in 1988 and closed down not too long after. But yeah, it would, like you said, transport dozens of characters around, and you can get on and ride around with the characters, which I think would be pretty overwhelming. Riding around a double decker bus with a ton of characters around you, that just seems like a lot.
I think it would be a lot, and I think probably what they run into now with the way the theme parks are is there's not a single day of the year that you're going to go to Walt Disney World or Epcot specifically, and there will be just these low crowds. So I
Right.
think that imagining what it's like with that many people, and maybe you have all the characters get off this double decker bus, and all of a sudden all of these people try to charge and meet these characters. I could see how it was a bit chaotic.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a nightmare. I mean, Magic Kingdom has the Main Street vehicles, including a double decker bus that go up and down Main Street, but those all stop running by 10 or 11 a.m. They run when it's early, and the early birds get to see it, and then as soon as the park gets crowded later in the day, they go away. They don't come back out.
Right. And they've had to do away with things like that. Back, I remember as a kid, you would walk into Magic Kingdom and you would find dozens of characters at the front of the park uh, at all times of day. In the morning, you would find them in the evenings, you would find them before the 3 o'clock parade. I met everything from Cruella de Vil to Peter Pan to Robin Hood and Little John up there.
Hmm.
To Pinocchio and Geppetto. There were some really rare characters, and they were always out, the Aristocats, the Rescuers. And now, I think, due to the large, overwhelming nature of the crowds, they've had to take a lot of that away.
Yeah, it's certainly become very structured and regimented where you meet the characters. And I think, this is speaking to one of the things that Disney has been getting some heat for lately. It's for letting in so many people into their parks while also charging so much money. And you kind of wonder, I mean, that's a difficult thing. Disney has to decide whether or not it's worth capping the park entry at a lower number and therefore creating a better experience for everyone inside, or then that means that more people don't get in every day and there are more people left outside, literally outside the gates of Main Street. But I mean, I know you and I have both been to the parks on days it's maxed out, when we're working, especially around any holiday, Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, any of those holidays, Magic Kingdom will max out, and it's unbelievable. You cannot move the entire park, especially Main Street. You cannot
Yeah.
move.
It's a double-edged sword. They have a really tough time with figuring out exactly what's the right move there, because obviously you don't want to turn people away, but there becomes a point where there are so many people in these parks that it's not even fun anymore. You lose the magic of it because there's just so many crowds, particularly around the holidays. We see this very often on New Year's Eve, sometimes at Christmas time. I've even seen it during spring
Oh
break.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
obviously, in the Florida heat, it is hot in Florida almost every day of the year. It doesn't matter if it's winter time, you only get a couple cool days a year. And I think just that Florida heat combined with that many people, it is a double edged sword, and it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward. Obviously, we know Disney takes a lot of heat because they raise the ticket prices every what seems now like 6 months. The ticket prices are going up
Yeah.
just a little bit, and I think that maybe one of the solutions they look at is when you go to buy a park ticket, you have to choose a specific day that you're going to go in the park. I think maybe that's what they look into. Or if you buy a park hopper pass, you look into, okay, we're going to use it for this period of days. And of course, we're getting totally off topic, and this podcast is running very, very long.
It is very long.
Um,
Yeah, that's we should talk about the Disney Park holidays at some point. But yeah, I think we've really gone into it's a brief overview still, despite how long we've talked about it. A brief overview of World Showcase, because there is, as we said at the top of the episode, there is just so much that happens. It's an enormous section of the park. We talk about parks filling up. I have never seen Epcot fill up because there's just so much room for guests to wander around. But it's the three parks kind of feel like traditional Disney parks. Epcot, especially World Showcase, it doesn't feel as much of a Disney park as the other ones do.
no, and I will say, I think that might, as much as I love Disney World, be why Epcot is my favorite. I have always been a little partial to Epcot. It is my number one park through and through, and I think it is
Mm-hmm.
because there is so much that makes that park
Yeah,
unique.
I just wish they had a little more shade in there. It's so hot. Oh
Yes.
man, it's so hot. You're walking around that park. But yeah, Brandon, you got anything you want to go out on today?
No, I think that probably covers it all. If you've never been to Epcot or never been to World Showcase, you must check it out. You must have a Schafferhofer beer in Germany if you are 21 years of age or
Yeah.
older. And
That is actually, that's a good
yeah,
point. If there are any international listeners, we've had this a lot. I especially used to work in food and beverage. Drinking age in America is 21, and that's been a surprise to some people coming from especially European countries. It's 21 in America.
yes. So keep that in mind. If you plan to come over, you must be 21
Yeah.
years old.
Well, thank you so much for listening, Brandon. Thanks for being here and talking about this. It was a longer episode. Feel free to email us. We have an email at distantdisney@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments or want us to topic suggestions. I'm Danny Newman.
I'm Brandon Anderson. Thanks for listening to us. We will talk to you again next time.
Yep. Goodbye.